would like to welcome the Leeds Jewish community to this evening's Yom Hashoah ceremony. I am Corinne Levy, the UJIA Community Shlicha. I've had the pleasure of working with UJIA, the Zone and Makor in creating this meaningful evening. I would like also to thank Lord Mayor of Leeds, Councillor Eileen Taylor, President of Leeds Representative Council, Lisa Baker, Barbara Cline, Sandi Firth, Rabbi Cline and Rabbi Gilbert, and all of the youth for their meaningful contribution. Today on Yom Hashoah, we mark the start of the Yoms. In Israel, these 10 days are called Mishoah Litkuma, between Holocaust and Resurrection. In these 10 days, we remember the Holocaust, our sons and daughters who have fallen to ensure our continued freedom in our homeland. We cannot celebrate the Independence Day without Yom Hashoah and Yom HaZikaron, as these 2 days illustrate why we must be responsible for our own destiny. Today, we promise the millions of Jews who have died in the Holocaust and their families that we will forever preserve their memory. Year by year, the number of Holocaust survivors living among us is declining. As Jews and human beings, we are obligated to remember and commemorate the horrors committed against our people and persecuted minorities. Yigal Allon, commander of the Palmach, said, "When people does not honor its past, it lives in a present of little substance and faces a future clouded in doubt." Its words are even true today. Only if we remember the history of our people, we will know how to appreciate the importance of existence of the State of Israel and preserve it. Thank you for joining us on this meaningful and special evening. I would like to introduce Sandi Firth, a second-generation Holocaust survivor, to share our family's memories.
So when I hear the words second generation, I always think of the word survival, and more so in the last year than ever, because as awful as it's been for all of us, I just kept thinking about how terrible it must have been for my grandparents, for my parents, in different ways, because they had to survive. They wanted to survive. And we weren't in a concentration camp. I didn't have to worry about food. I didn't have to worry about a roof over my head or where people were. So, from that point of view, I feel very lucky. My parents came over here on the kinder transport. A pure coincidence that both my parents ended up in a Jewish refugee hostel in Birmingham when they were 16. My father came from Danzig and my mother came from Vienna. My father's family was small and his parents were divorced, so it was a strange thing for him because he ended up coming here and making a new life. I don't know what would have happened otherwise. My mother, her father was one of 13 and her mother was one of 7, and very religious, living in a religious area in Vienna. And my grandfather was a furrier, and on Kristallnacht, he had a new car delivered that day. And of course, the Austrians, the lovely Austrians, took it away and smashed all the windows of his shop. And that's what made her parents think it's time. Unbeknown to them, so many of their families were being murdered. They didn't know what was going on. Mummy she's recently died, a cousin who ended up in Rehovot, Elsa. The Austrians came and they took her husband away and threw her baby out of the window. These are things that happen to families, and you've got to keep going, keep strong, to survive. Her parents then decided they'd better do something and walked from Vienna to Budapest with one of my grandfather's brothers and his wife and one of my grandmother's sisters and her husband. And the 6 of them found a flat in the basement in Budapest But the three men, my grandfather, his brother and his brother-in-law, couldn't speak Hungarian. My grandmother and her sister and sister-in-law could, because they were born on the Austro-Hungarian border. So my grandfather and brother-in-law all played deaf and dumb for 3 years. And a woman in the flat was saying like, oh, how, one member of a family that, is sad, but three members of the same family, it's a tragedy, but it was the only way. They couldn't let them know that they were actually not Hungarian. And they ended up going to, this was all survive again. It's always survival. And they ended up allegedly going to Palestine on a train, but ended up at Bergen-Belsen. That's another story. They, in Bergen-Belsen, they survived again on potatoes and carrots, which they found very, impossible to eat after. And it's a strange thing because it's a fact that second generation people like myself have always got food on them. And I believe, certainly more on holiday when I don't know where I am, just in case. And I believe that all goes back to my grandparents at Bergen-Belsen and to my parents coming here and having to eat different kinds of food. When Mummy and her brother went to the first people who took them in when they arrived in England, they went to a non-Jewish family, as lots of kinder did. And it was a Friday, and the lady of the house said, oh, I'm so glad you've come on a Friday. She said, we've got a special treat tonight. It's pork. So Mummy had to tell them, we're kosher, we don't eat, so they had to adjust, and they had to survive. My parents came to Leeds and, with me, I was 9 months old, but Mummy was already pregnant. She had 3 in 2.5 years, and they had nothing. And again, survival. They lived in one room in Reginald Terrace. They ended up, I as a child, my first memory is living in Hare Hills Avenue above a Wurst factory. I didn't feel any different at Cowper Street, but when I got to Roundhay High Girls' School, I did start to feel different because people were talking more as I was growing up about their families in Leeds and what they'd got up to. As a Jewish girl, only 10% of pupils were Jewish at Roundhay, so I found that difficult as well. But sometimes girls would come home with me and they want to eat the cake because Mummy was always baking, and especially Kugelupf, which is an Austrian cake, chocolate yeast cake. And I did feel different. I guess because we were poor as well, my parents couldn't afford the school uniform, so one of my aunts had knitted me the school cardigan, and it was their way of surviving, and the school scarf, because they had to make ends meet, with 3 children, it was very hard. My friends used to say funny, things that my parents' accents used to, they used to say, oh, well, your mother's got an accent, you're fat. I never noticed it, but when it was pointed out to me, I found it as a young teenager even quite embarrassing. But I suppose that's why I felt different. I don't feel I have any roots. I never felt I had roots, and I haven't really got any roots. Most of Mummy's family lived now in America or in Israel. Daddy had a very small family. They live in Israel. They did get there in the end. Daddy's parents ended up going on a ship from Danzig, where he came from, was a free port, to Haifa, but they were turned away, and they ended up spending the war years in Mauritius. And both, even though they were divorced, they both ended up in Israel, in different parts of Israel. And what's amazing, this survival instinct, I think, is also down to religion. All my mother's family kept their religious beliefs totally, stayed Orthodox. never ever doubted that they would be okay. They had no idea. This survival instinct has definitely gone through to me. I mean, one of the things also that I didn't mention that happened in Budapest, my grandmother heard about her cousin's son. She had a cousin living there, and they'd taken her 3-year-old boy. The convent had taken the 3-year-old boy, and we don't know how, but she got into that convent and she got that boy out. Because they were giving the children to the Nazis. There's no question about it. It's one of those stories. So all these people been through all this makes me feel very special that I've come from this. And although my parents always spoke about it, I think I've absorbed it all, but I haven't actually passed it on so much to my children. I don't know why, even though they are surrounded with it. But my son, funnily enough, a couple of years ago, decided to take part in a bike ride, especially for the kinder. And it was from Berlin to London. It was 600 miles. A lot of young people took part. It was the most wonderful thing. And they raised a lot of money, and they each had a person, a kind to who they were representing. And because my father's passed away now, but he did it for my mum. And the bizarre thing is, it finished at Liverpool Street Station, where there is a wonderful set of statues built by Frank Meisel, very famous. He's got a gallery in Jaffa, in Old Jaffa, and Frank Meisel was from Danzig, where Daddy was born. It was a wonderful coincidence. Although my children didn't study it at school because it wasn't allowed in those days, they've obviously taken in this feeling that I've got too, and they've passed it on to their children who are learning, so they're asking questions which is really, really important, and they are so much more aware of it that I know that they will pass it on to their children because it's part of their history. The fourth generation are definitely absorbing it, and they'll be passing it on to their children, and they have to, because we must never forget this, ever.
Thank you, Sandi. We will now hear a poem read by Josh and Jack Wisnia.
Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep.
I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow.
I am the sun on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain.
When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush
of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the soft starshine at night.
Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there, I did not die.
We are now going to hear from Councillor Eileen Taylor, the Lord Mayor of Leeds, followed by the lighting of 6 candles in the memory of all who perished in the Holocaust.
My name is Councillor Eileen Taylor, and I am the Lord Mayor of our lovely city, Leeds. While I am not able to be with you in person tonight to remember the 6 million Jewish souls who were murdered by the Nazi during the Holocaust, I am most certainly with you in spirit. This year, Jewish communities across the world are coming together, as we all done so many times over the past 12 months, virtually. But tonight, on Yom Hashoah, we come together to remember this most tragic of episode of history. It is my prayer that the lesson from the Holocaust should stand an eternal warning of mankind's capacity to ignore the humanity of others. May we never see such inhumanity again. I thank you all for taking the time to come together, to remember, to mourn, and to look to a more positive and tolerant future. This year we are virtually. Next year, may we all remember together in person. I'm lighting this yellow candle in memory of Alice Ashfeld of Berlin, Germany, who perished at Auschwitz in 1943, age 42, and in memory of all the victims of the Holocaust. Thank you, and God bless you all.
I am lighting this yellow candle in memory of Josef Herz of Hungary, who perished at Auschwitz in 1944, age 72.
In our roles as heads of faith and on behalf of the GSAL community,
we are lighting this yellow candle in memory of Marika Groth of Polgar, who perished at Auschwitz in 1944, aged 8.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of my great-grandmother, Bertha Breindl, who was murdered at Theresienstadt.
I am lighting this yellow candle in memory of Gabi Grosch of Zalonta, who perished in Auschwitz 1944, aged 8.
I am lighting this yellow candle in memory of Tommy Groch of Nagibanya, who perished in Auschwitz in 1944, aged 6.
I would now like to introduce Rabbi Gilbert, who will read his call, the memorial prayer.
Yiska prayer for martyrs of the Holocaust. Yiska Elohim, nishmot hakadoshim v'hatahorim, shehemtu, v'shenehergu, v'shenishchatu, v'shenisrefu, v'shenitbu, shenichnaku, al kiddush Hashem. B'schar zeh tiyeno nafshotehem, tzururot b'tzoror hachayim. Im nishmot Avraham Yitzchak veYaakov, Sarah Rivka Rachel veLeah, v'im sha'a tzadikim v'tzadkoniyot shebegan Eden v'noima Amen. May the Lord remember the souls of the holy and pure ones who were killed, murdered and slaughtered, burned, drowned and strangled for the sanctification of the name. As reward for this, may their souls be bound in the bond of life, together with the souls of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel and Leah, and together with the other righteous men and women in the Garden of Eden. And let us say, Amen.
We will now hear from Rabbi Cline, who will recite El Malei Rachamim.
O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant perfect rest upon the wings of the divine presence in the exalted places of the holy and pure ones, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, to the dear souls of our brothers and sisters, men, women and children, 6 million, who perished in the Holocaust. May the Master of Mercy continue to shelter their souls for evermore. The Lord is their inheritance. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. El Moirachamim Shechein Bamramim Hamitzaim Nechanachana Shechina B'ma'alahot Kadoshim U'Tahorim Kazoha Haraki Amasirim Et Nishmot Sheishet Minyanim Achoteinu V'Achyoteinu Anashim V'Nashim V'Taf Shenehergu Al Kiddush Hashem Bashoah Ana Balarachamim Yastireim Pesete K'nafvav Li'olamim V'Yitzro B'Yitzro Hachai V'T Nishmotam Adonai Hu Nachalatam V'yanuchu b'shalom al mishkavotam v'nomah Amen.
Please join us for a minute of silence in a memory of all those that perished in the Holocaust.
I'm Lisa Baker, President of the Leeds Jewish Representative Council, and I thank you for joining this important Yom Hashoah event. On behalf of the community and the surrounding areas, may I urge you to join the yomhashoah.org link for the national event, where hopefully you will see me lighting a candle on behalf of our community. May I wish you all health and safety in the coming months ahead as we ease out of the lockdown. Thank you.
We are almost at the end of this community ceremony. The following short film was made by the British Army when they liberated Bergen-Belsen. This includes a moving rendition of the Israeli national anthem, Atikva, the Hope.
The day I reached Belsen concentration camp, the 5th day of liberation, was a Friday, the day before the Jewish Sabbath. Something like half the surviving prisoners at Belsen were Jews, and the Jewish chaplain to the British Second Army, the Reverend L.H. Hardman, held an eve of the Sabbath service in the open air in the midst of the camp. It was the first Jewish service that many of the men and women present had taken part in for 6 years. It was probably the first Jewish service held on German soil in absolute security and without fear for a decade. Around us lay the corpses that there had not been time to clear away even after 5 days. 40,000 or more had been cleared, but there were still 1,000 or 2,000 around. And people were still lying down and dying in broad daylight in front of our eyes. This was the background to this open-air Jewish service. During the service, the few hundred people gathered together were sobbing openly, with joy at their liberation, and with sorrow the memory of their parents and brothers and sisters that had been taken from them and gassed and burned. These people knew they were being recorded. They wanted the world to hear their voice. They made a tremendous effort, which quite exhausted them. Listen.
Am Yisrael Chai, the children of Israel still liveth.
This concludes our Yom Hashoah community ceremony. Thank you for joining us and to all who contributed. Keep safe.